Hello, welcome back to your YouTube channel all about aquaculture, where we share the information on every aspect of the aquaculture value chain with a focus on best practices for each of the aspects that is covered by the topic. On today's edition, the topic is about managing aquaculture projects, which is quite an interesting topic because it's not something we are familiar to present. But what is the rationale behind this topic? Why really we want to focus a presentation on managing aquaculture projects? The reason is that when you travel around the world and you meet people who have been involved in aquaculture for long, they usually complain that, especially in developing countries, many aquaculture projects have been initiated, but only a few have been successfully achieved. And one of the reasons why people might fail to achieve the targets, to achieve the indicators that are designed at the beginning of the project is the fact that not everybody really consider management of aquaculture project as a specialty. You know, people always think that when you know how to farm fish, you know how to take care of the fish, you have a successful farm, then you can manage project. So that's not always the case. You know, we know examples of people who are good in production, but also good in management and so on. And that is even how it should be. But there are also people who are specialized in project management. And usually when they have these skills, they can adapt them to any commodity, including fish. For those who do not know me, why am I the person presenting this? I'm an aquaculturist with 17 years of work experience in Africa, Asia, North America, and Europe. And I'm also a certified project management professional, PMP, from the Project Management Institute. And what this actually certifies is the skills that you already have, but also give you credit and make sure that people who hire you to manage a project, for example, they know that you know the best practices in project management, and that if you apply them, you could you have a lot of chances to achieve the project scope on time and within the budget. I've had the opportunity to manage projects in North America, and one of the examples is the project that I was managing when I was the scientific director of aquaculture at the Coastal Zone Research Institute in Canada, which was a $4.8 million project involving 8 provinces of Canada out of 10, and 1 territory, the Yukon territory, out of 3. So we had about 60 stakeholders from the industry, from universities, from research institutes, and also I interacted a lot with the governments, governments of Quebec, governments of New Brunswick, and the federal government of Canada. So this gave me a lot of experience, and right now I'm managing through the work I do professionally. I manage projects in Asia and in Africa, and I'm involved in other projects that are managed by my colleagues in Asia and Africa. So the presentation here is based essentially on the project management body of knowledge, which is a document, which is a guideline produced by the Project Management Institute that has certified me as PMP. So before we focus on aquaculture, I want to bring in and explain some general concepts with examples from aquaculture. So I want to here in this slide present the relationship between portfolios, programs, and projects. So a portfolio is a collection of projects, programs, and sub-portfolios and operations that are managed as a group to achieve strategic objectives. So people managing portfolios are people who think strategic, so they look at it from the big picture. They are not focusing only on one project. They focus on one project. They focus on they consider one project, but they also consider programs and sometimes even sub portfolios. So these are usually like the CEO of an organization or maybe a vice president of something. So these are people really looking at it from a strategic point of view, but at a higher level. And an example could be, for example, as I said, the aquaculture division of an organization which is based in Bafang, in Cameroon, for example. So if there is the organization with the CEO and then different divisions, like if it's an aquaculture, you have an aquaculture firm, and then you have division of nutrition, division of genetics, and so on. So the person leading the division of aquaculture nutrition could be considered as a portfolio manager. But now a program, which is sometimes under a portfolio, but could also be out of it. It could be a different program standing alone. Actually, it's a group of related projects, sub-programs, and program activities managed in a coordinated way to obtain benefits not available from managing them individually. That's the definition from the Project Management Institute, meaning that each of the components of a program could be managed individually, but if they are not coordinated, so if they are managed individually, they will not achieve a program objective. So when you usually hear people talking about a programmatic approach to project management, meaning that the person dealing with the program considers the results of each of the project in order to achieve the program objective. And every project is managed taking into account the scope, the budget, and the time that is dedicated in other projects, because they are all coordinated. And now an example of that is in the aquaculture division, for example, you could have a fish breeding group or a fish health group. So you have an organization, you have an aquaculture division. In the aquaculture division, now you have different groups. And in that group, the fish breeding program now will have a lot of projects. So they could have a project on tilapia, the other one on catfish, on salmon, and so on. And now, what is a project? A project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a result, a service, or a product. So whatever is the outcome. What the project actually wants to achieve is defined by the project. It's not always, you see in some project, they will always ask you what is the result, what is the service, what is the product. All this could be delivered by one project, but in general, a project only has one thing to deliver, and it could be a result, it could be a service, or it could be a product. So the definition of the project depends on the person designing the project. And an example of project is, for example, an example of project is a World Bank funded project aiming at establishing, let's say, fish hatchery in Bafang Division, West Province or West Region in Cameroon. So that's a project. It's very specific. The area is specific. The objective is what? Designing and establishing the hatchery in Bafang. So it's very specific. And this project could be part of a program, which is the aquaculture, the fish breeding program in a division, which is a portfolio, which is the aquaculture division. So this diagram, illustrates the relationship between portfolios, sub-portfolios, projects, and program. And this is, of course, borrowed from the Project Management Institute PM book. So this is the relationship between them. As you can see here, you have the portfolio, you have the projects that could stand alone and still be part of the portfolio, but not necessarily be part of the program. So each of them could stand alone, but when they are all contributing to the strategic objective of the organization at the portfolio level, they are part of the portfolio. But here, this is a program, for example, which is part of the portfolio. And in this program, you have, of course, projects, and then you have sub-programs. So each of them could have, again, like the programs and portfolio, you could have sub-programs, you could have sub-portfolios. So now let's focus on the example that we used there about establishing the hatchery in a province of Cameroon or in a division in Cameroon. So, as we said, the project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a result, service, or product. So, the word temporary means here that there is a start date and an end date. This is very important. I remember when I was growing up in Cameroon, I was involved in some aquaculture and even forestry projects. When the project was going to the end, people were very sad. It was like a failure, like projects should never end. They were always like, okay, let's keep something so that we get an extension of the project. Extending a project is not necessarily a good thing because a project should end. But a project could end and generate another project. So people should focus on achieving a project on time so that they could suggest new projects that will take the result, the service, or the product that was developed in the previous project and apply that in the second project. Not that they extend the project indefinitely to keep the job and keep some money flowing. No, that's not the best practice in project management. And it is an endeavor, meaning that it's a group of activities that are all managed. So there is a budget related to that. And the end product, the scope, what really the project wants to achieve is a result, a service, or a product. So we have talked about the project, but what's actually project management? When I say I'm a certified project management, what is the project management? So the project management, according to the Project Management Institute, is actually the application of the knowledge, the tools, the skills, the techniques to project management, to projects in order to achieve and to meet the project requirements. So it's really making sure that the right tools, the right knowledge, the right skills are applied in order to achieve the results. You remember, you know probably this when they say, so anyway, to achieve the results. So a project is, so project management. So project management has many phases. So project management has 5 processes. We have initiating process, planning process, executing process, closing process, and just in the middle of the initiation till the middle of closing, we have monitoring and controlling. So we'll go step by step and discuss each of these processes. So what actually are the project management processes? They are tools and techniques used in applying the management skills and capabilities that will ensure the effective flow of the project throughout its life cycle. That's according to the Project Management Institute. So, for example, the initiating processes are performed to define a new project or a phase in a new project by obtaining authorization to start the project or the phase. So, for example, if the World Bank wants to start this project in Bafan, in Cameroon, and they say, okay, well, let's now initiate the project. So as a first step, they will have to define the project, get the budget, make sure that they have the budget. They are the sponsor of the project. So they have to make sure they have the budget, and then hire a project manager with whom they will develop and validate the project charter, which is actually the contract, which is the terms of reference of the project that is going to be executed. And once that is defined, now we go to the next processes, which are the planning processes. The planning processes are required to establish the scope of the project, to refine the objectives, and to define the course of actions. So that's where the project management plan is developed. So we now have the project manager, we now have the contract. Now we assign a team that is going to lead the project. And these guys now, they will take the terms of reference, which is the project charter, and they make sure that now they decompose it and they cover every aspect that the project will be working on in order to achieve the overall scope that is defined in the contract, in the project charter. So, and when they are doing this exercise, they end up with a document which is a project management plan covering every aspect from the budget to the quality of the project to the staff that will be involved to the quantifiable indicators, the number of beneficiaries and everything. That's in the project management plan. Following this planning processes, there is executing processes that are performed to actually complete the work defined in the project management plan in order to satisfy the project specifications. And that's where the team, the project management team, start executing the plan. Of course, during the execution of the plan, there is room to make some changes to improve the plan. And the improvement goes through a process of monitoring and controlling that's actually required to track, review, regulate the process, and of course, the performance of the project. And if the project is not on track, that's where you get the information through monitoring and controlling, and then you redefine or you adjust the project management plan. All this align with the project charter. And this is done in collaboration with the sponsor. And once everything is achieved, so at the end of the project, there is what we call closing processes, which are performed to finalize all activities across all the process groups to formally close the project or a phase of the project. So there is a time where the project has to say, okay, now we have completed the project, whether it's successfully completed or not, but then we close the project, we draw the lessons, and we move on. So the project has to end. And when I say it ends, maybe it will end and lead to another project, or all the project resources are just dissolved and everything is done. And if the project is and the project is completed. So, as we said initially, there is a start date and there is an end date. And each project has a project cycle. And we could have a single phase project like the one we just described right now. But we could also have many phases in the project. So for example, here you see the triple phase project. And for our example of establishing a fishery in Bafang, Cameroon, for example. So the first phase could be the building of the facility. So the structure, doing the construction in the facility, of the facility. And the second phase could be, for example, the installation of the pipe and water flow and everything to make sure that we have the concrete, we have the roof, we have everything, but then the water is flowing. And the third phase now could be the bringing in broodstock and starting breeding the fish. And each of these phases will also have all the 5 cycles. Will follow the same processes. So we also have the initiating, the planning, the executing, the closing, and monitoring and controlling phases, processes of each phase. So we will also have the initiating processes, the planning processes, the executing processes, the closing processes, and the monitoring and controlling processes for each phase of this triple phase project. But you could also have projects that are not sequential, meaning that they are not going from one phase to the other, but there are phases that are overlapping, like the example here, which is this is what it will look like. And for our specific case, it could be that the building and piping are combined as one phase, but once the room that is going to hold the broodstock is completed, the second phase starts. So we put the broodstock there while we are preparing the room where we'll be doing incubation of eggs, for example, and hatching and larviculture. So these 2 phases of building and piping overlap at the end of the building and piping, because we start introducing the broomstock in the completed parts of the structure. So every project goes through life cycles. They are not necessarily combined in this order, so there could be overlaps between many of the processes, but each of them should cover all these. But each of them should have these. But each of them should go through these project cycles. And the initiation phase starts, of course, with the start of the project and ends at a certain point. So as you can see, the initiating, the planning, and the executing start closely. So as you can see, the initiating, the planning, and also the initiating. So as you can see, the initiating, the planning, and the monitoring and controlling all start together. So these groups of activities all start at the same time, because from the time people are initiating the project, they are writing the project charter, they are hiring the project manager, they start doing the controlling. And once the project manager is in, he starts planning. So whatever meeting they have, they consider that as a planning meeting, although they also are still defining the terms of reference of the project. And then, of course, somewhere, and of course, the initiating phase will end while the other phases are still ongoing. So on the planning, it's going on. So every time there is any issue that is recorded during the monitoring and controlling, there is a planning, there is a replanning in order to adjust the project management plan and make sure that by executing the new adjustment, the project scope could be achieved. So this is something that is going regularly until before the closing of the project. And of course, the closing of the project starts during the execution, because there are phases, as we say. So once one phase is completed, the closing also helps confirm that. So for example, if for the archery, you have to build the structure and put the roof. Once the structure and the roof, which are completed, then the closing phase starts, because they have to close and say, okay, for the structure, it's done. The project management team is satisfied. So that's how all of them are combined. And as I said, they are not always executed in this specific order. So sometimes they could have more overlaps, or they could be a bit more separated, depending on the project and also on how the sponsor of the project perceives the project management. And when I say the sponsor of the project perceives the project management, that brings us to the project management team and the position of the project manager. So people will sometimes, when they are project managers, when they get the position, they think they are very powerful. They will take every decision. They manage a team. They are so proud. Yes, they do all that. They have a lot of authorities in many of the projects that are managed, but they have to keep in mind that they work in a team, and that they have to build the team of for the project management. It's not just them and all the others are below. No, they have to have a team. And for this specific case of building the archery, for example, in addition to the project manager, there could be an assistant project manager, an accountant, a monitoring and evaluation leader, and a secretary that is sitting in the project management team. And then we also have, of course, depending on where we are, some government officers, some fish farmers, and even scientists, which are part of the team, of the project team, that will help executing the project. And there is always the sponsor. So the sponsor has to be there to make sure that everything that they do as a team, they inform the sponsor, they let the sponsor know. Not that they work like in a bubble, and when comes the time of evaluation or getting money for the next phase, they go to the sponsor, which is, for our case, the World Bank, for example, and then the World Bank says, no, I didn't plan this. This is not how I understood this aspect of the project, you have to redo it. But if they are part of the project team, they are considered as part of the project team, not necessarily benefiting from this. You know, the project team could have some people doing the work on a voluntary basis, of course. And then now, all the knowledge, all the skills, all the tools, and all the achievements of the project team actually are oriented towards the project, as you can see here. And now, in all this, you have the project manager, who is actually the person assigned by the performing organization to lead the team that is responsible for achieving the project objectives. So the project manager is not leading the project only, he's leading also the team. So being in the team is very important when you are a project manager, not just a powerful person and everyone reports to the project manager. And now, as a team, the project management team will lead the project. And what do they do concretely? They have to identify all the requirements that will allow them to achieve the project. They have to address various needs, concerns, and expectations from stakeholders. I told you I manage a project in Canada with 60 stakeholders. So you need to have some good to set some good and maintain excellent communication among these stakeholders. And also they have to manage the stakeholders toward meeting the project requirements and creating project deliverables, not just to be friends with them and make sure that they have good dinners. No, they have to keep in mind that even if they meet regularly, they have business lunch or whatever, it's in order to achieve the project deliverables. And again, which is the most challenging part of project management, they have to, as a team, led by the project manager, to balance the competing project constraints, including the scope. So that's the objective, the results that will be achieved, the products or the services. Then the quality, the monitoring and controlling is there to make sure that the results, the product and service are of high quality. The schedule, that's the time. So as I said, start date, end date. That's how projects should be managed. So projects should be managed on time, on schedule. The budget. No one has enough money. So there is not enough money in any project. So the project manager and the project management team have to make sure that they use the budget that they have to achieve the project. So it's not a very good practice to always go back to the sponsor and say we need a little bit more money. Usually the sponsor will provide the funds for the project based on the experience of the sponsor and also the history of other projects that were achieved with almost similar budget. So the project manager and the project management team have to make sure that they achieve the project within the budget. That's the best practice. Of course, they could always go back to the sponsor if there is any major constraint, making them not being able to achieve the project with the available budget. And then the resource, managing resource, like managing people, managing the buildings, managing the trucks, managing all the material that is used to achieve the project. That's a lot of work. That's really a lot of work. But with good project management skills and tools, the project management team could achieve that. So that's a strong part of the responsibilities. And then the last but not the least is managing risk. I would say that 30% of the work of a project manager is actually to manage the risk. Because a risk could put the project in a situation where it doesn't move on. So in the next slides, we are going to focus on managing budget and resources and managing risks. The budget and the resources are utilized gradually in the project. So at the beginning of the project, just at the start of the project, the budget is not very much used. For example, during the start of the project, there is just the hiring of the project manager and all the members of the project management team, renting the office and equipping the office, buying the trucks or whatever that are needed for the project. And then gradually there is organizing and preparing of the project that starts getting some money So that start using money and the expenses over time, the cost and staffing level increases until the part where there is the execution of the project, where the work is actually carrying out. So many people have been hired and they start costing. And then during the execution, the enumerators and the laborers and everything are hired and the activities are ongoing. So that's costing. But as the project is being, some phases of the project has been closed, also the cost and staffing level starts going down. So it's normal that a project that at a certain point starts with 2 people, hires during the carrying out of the work could have 100 people in the project, and gradually the number of people decreases. So people have to have that in mind, that during the closing phases, some people have to leave gradually. And leaving a project is not a problem, because a project is a temporary endeavor. It's not something that's permanent. So someone hired in the project, if the project is for 5 years, they could say your part in it will be 2 years. So after the 2 years, you leave and the other people stay. So by the end of the project again, only the person who stays in again is the project manager, because the last phase, the closing phase, signing of everything is done with the project manager and a few people like the accountant only. And when I say people have to leave, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to leave their jobs. In some organizations, there are many projects, so they just move from one project to another one. But for the specific case of that project, if someone was working only in one project, the person has to be ready to leave the project and the organization at the end of the project, especially if there is not any additional project which is developed as the result of this project. Then, now managing risk. This is, as I said, a very difficult part of the project management's job, because as you can see, at the start of the project, the risk is very high. The risk and uncertainty are very, very high, meaning that, for example, for the sponsor, hiring the right project manager, it's something very difficult to find the right person who will do the job. And then now, once the project manager is hired, the project manager needs to hire the project management team. So that's also, these are challenges. You hire people you have never worked with and everything. But as the project management team starts working together, the risk goes down, because they get used to working together. They get used to the project, to the sponsor, to the stakeholders. So gradually the risk and uncertainty goes down. They gain more experience as well in project management, in managing the team, managing the resources, the budget, the schedule, the scope, and everything. But, and at the same time, the cost of making changes follows an opposite trend. So, for example, as the risk is high at the start, the cost to change that is small. So if a project the manager comes in and after 2 weeks he doesn't like the job and he goes, it's easy to get another one. But once this project manager and the team they are in, gradually changing one of them becomes very costly to the project. And if, for example, at a certain point here, the project manager leaves, the new project manager that will be hired, the organization will be ready to pay 2 or 3 times more than what they were paying to the previous one, because they absolutely need a project manager to achieve the thing. And the person coming in will need a certain time also to adjust to the project, to adjust to the scope, to adjust to the sponsor and the stakeholders. So that will be a risk again. And if he doesn't like it, or maybe he doesn't adjust, maybe the project will not be achieved on time, on budget, and that would not be interesting for the organization. So the cost of making changes as the project is evolving gets higher and higher. And one of the ways to manage this risk is to make sure that there is a good management of stakeholders. Meaning that the project manager has to apply some of the models that have been developed. And some of them are like the power interest grid and the power influence grid. Here I'm going to present only the power interest grid. What does it look like? It's something like this, where there is a grouping of stakeholders based on their level of authority in the project, as well as their level of interest in the project, which actually conditions their active involvement in the project. So, as you can see in this figure, which is borrowed from the Project Management Institute. So, for example, here in the y-axis, you have the power, and then on the x-axis, you have the interest. So, when a stakeholder has a lot of power but low interest, you have to keep that stakeholder satisfied. And an example of stakeholders in this would be the politicians. So if you are working with the government, with the mayor or whatever who is part of this project as the stakeholder, usually he doesn't have a lot of interest in the project, but he has a lot of power. He gives the permits and everything. So you have to make sure that they are satisfied. But then if you now have people who have low power and low interest, and for example, could be the government officers. The person will just come and you go to the field with the person. So the person has to be there to make sure that things are moving and report that to the government. You just have to monitor the person. So you make sure that you speak the same language, you're on the same page, you explain things to the person. But then now, if you have someone or one stakeholder with a lot of power and very high interest, and usually who is this person is the sponsor. And the beneficiaries, they have a lot of power. And they also have a lot of interest. You have to manage them closely. You have to be close to them to make sure that they know. And for our case here, for the hatchery, it will be the sponsor, the World Bank. So you have to make sure that they are working together. By the way, I've not received any sponsorship from the World Bank for this work. I'm just taking it as an example. It could be an individual. It could be the African Development Bank or European Commission or Asian Development Bank or Islamic Development Bank or whatever. So I just took the World Bank as an example. And then now, if you have people who are stakeholders who have low power but a lot of interest, and like the fish farmers for our case, they have interest in this because they want to have fingerlings for their farms from the hatchery. So they have a lot of interest, but they don't have the power. They don't control the building. They don't control the management of the hatchery. You have to make sure that they are kept informed. They have to know the strength of fish you are using there. You have to talk to them and train them on how to farm the fish. What are the type of diets they have to provide to the fish in order to let them express the genetic potential that you have developed at the hatchery level. That's very important. You have to keep them informed. So this is a power influence grid that will be used to manage the stakeholders. So you group them, and once you have them, you could have 20 stakeholders here, 20 there, 100 here, and so on. You create like mailing list, and you say, okay, these guys, I will have to send them an email every week on this topic and call one or two of them to make sure that they are satisfied. And then these guys have to have them in another mailing list, and again another mailing list. And I have different ways of communicating with each of them. But they all have to be informed or monitor or kept satisfied or kept or managed closely. Each of them has its own requirements. This has to be well done, and that will really help the project manager and the project management team to reduce the risk. And when I talk about stakeholders, even some staff of the project management, the benefit, everyone could be a stakeholder. And now, from all this, I think we will all agree that the need for project management skills is real. It's something that is needed in research organizations and universities in the aquaculture industry, and above all in aquaculture development organizations. So it's not just that when you know the technical aspect of the project, you could also manage the project. But it's clear that when you know the technical aspect of the project and you grow in seniority, you get exposed to this, you develop some skills. You don't need to be certified, but you also have the skills and everything. So this is very important to mention. And I would like to thank the Project Management Institute for certifying me and for helping me getting the skills, the tools that are needed to manage projects. I'm very grateful. As you can see, my certification was obtained a few years ago and this year. I also thank Aquaculture International, which is a consulting firm based in Canada, that has sponsored this video. And of course, the YouTube channel that we have is all about aquaculture. So please subscribe if you have the opportunity. But above all, like this video on the YouTube channel, and don't hesitate to send us your questions with through the email that you see here. So thank you very much for your attention and for joining once again your YouTube channel. Feel free also to suggest new topics that you would like us to cover, and we'll be very happy to invite some experts on these topics that we will present that to you. So thank you very much, and do not forget to like and subscribe to your channel, all about aquaculture.